Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second brunch, Sunday brunch. Of course, it's great to have everyone here. We have Michael Lambert, we have Political X again, and we have Truth to Power. So we're going to talk about a number of issues today. Of course, Ukraine is the main one, but we're also going to hopefully touch on some others as well. So, guys, how are things going? How's your Sunday? Anyone want to jump in with that first of all? Alex? How are things with you?
Pretty good. I've got my coffee and I've had my
We're ready
breakfast,
to
so I'm
go.
ready to talk about the Ukraine and everything else. How about yourself, Michael? How's everything with you? And
My Sunday's going fine. I go to bed very late. I get up very late, and so I didn't even know it was light at 9 o'clock. But yeah, I'm ready to go. Yeah.
I'm with you, Michael. Still waking up at the moment, but we'll get there.
So I'd like to start off maybe with Ukraine. There's a lot of talk about pressure being put on NATO for a no-fly zone. Does anyone think that's eventually going to happen, or because we've been hearing from NATO that they say, look, they're completely ruling it out. Is there a chance that they could break and they would say, yes, we will impose something like that, or what do you guys think?
I don't think there will ever be a no-fly zone. I think it would be crazy because all we have to do is shoot down one Russian plane, and then we're in World War III. I mean, everybody knows that. And whilst it would be great to be able to stop the Russians flying all over and doing all this damage, it's just too risky. I think efforts have to be concentrated on doing anything but that.
It definitely feels like a repeat of many Cold War situations. I mean, it is a repeat of Cold War situations. Yeah. It's different in some ways, though. I know that in the Vietnam War, the Russian pilots and the American pilots clashed, which is interesting. That was just like a given. But this seems to be much more tense.
Yes.
In many ways, this would probably play into what Putin wants. He wants a narrative where he can go, yes, look at NATO, they're expanding, and they're taking over, and they're shooting down Russian planes, and
yes,
giving these huge rewards to like the pilots being shot down, and memorials and videos and everything else. So I've got a funny feeling that might be another part of why they're not doing the no-fly zone.
Yeah,
just plays into his narrative.
Yeah.
Rob, what do you think?
I almost think that no-fly zone is like a euphemism. It would be a war in the skies, wouldn't it? Absolutely. So no-fly zones. It sounds so passive, but actually, it's a definite, very big escalation if we go that route. I just don't think NATO are going to do it.
No, I don't.
No. Yeah, because I was reading also about how if it's not just in the air, but it's also on the ground, and if Russia have surface-to-air missiles, SAMs in Russia, well, they would need to be taken out. So it would not just stay within Ukraine. It would of course be expanded into Russia. So you would eventually see some sort of creep, and then if they couldn't be taken out from the air, then they'd need to be taken out from the ground, and that would involve boots on the ground probably. So unfortunately, it breaks my heart seeing these images every day. What's happening. But as I think Michael said, it would feed into the narrative, or maybe it was Alex had said it. It'd feed into the narrative that Putin is being attacked, and NATO is this evil force. And then we also have to look at how recently, just a few days ago, Twitter was taken down in Russia. Facebook has been taken down. YouTube, I think. I'm not sure if it's still up or it's down, but it seems YouTube has also been taken down. So if you think about, okay, how are ordinary Russian people going to get their information? Well, they'll have to resort to TV, and the state control the airwaves. So it's very difficult for, especially the older generation, maybe younger generation are able to find ways around it, with VPNs or something, or some type of tools. But the older generation are just going to, receive their information from the state media, and Putin is completely in control of that now. So it's very... Sorry, Michael.
Sorry. I was going to say he has complete control of the state media, But I think what is going to have an effect is the fact that so many Western countries are pulling out now. And when they go to their shopping centres and there's no, there's no Apple and there's no H&M and all the rest of it, it's difficult to explain that away. Because Putin is saying at the moment, he's saying that he's intervening in Ukraine because there's a genocide and they're all Nazis. Well, when all these companies are pulling out and all these sporting events are being cancelled, you can hardly say that's because of a genocide in the country next door. It doesn't make any sense. So I think people are then going to start questioning what is really going on. And I think, as you say, young people will find out. They'll find ways of getting information off the internet, and the word will spread. And I think that's the only way there's any hope of ending all this is some sort of uprising within Russia.
Dr. Johan, sorry, I just want to say thanks to Dr. Johan for that super chat. Hey, you, thank you so much for that. Rob, do you want to say anything about that as well?
I mean, we're leading on from this, retailers and other companies pulling out of Russia. We're talking about it subsequent to our discussion on the no-fly zone. And my concern is that the way this plays in Russia is not so much, oh my God, the world's against us, we must be doing something wrong, as it's like almost, I'm 60 years old. Russia from the Cold War is very much a sense of grievance that the Western world is against them. And I'm actually just worried that these grand gestures of IKEA pulling out of Russia and all the rest of them, H&M or whatever it was, Hermes or whatever. Sorry, I'm not a fashion expert. But it just plays into the Russian sense of grievance of, hey, the nasty, wicked West are now picking on us. And Putin's language yesterday was, these sanctions are akin to an act of war. That's the way it's playing out in Russia. And I saw a couple of polls that were done within the Russian population this week, and public support for Putin in Russia is still, it's the vast majority in support. Although going back to Michael's point, it does tend to be the older generations that get their information from the TV, and the younger demographic are sort of more open to the internet. Things are probably seeing more like the truth. But the vast majority of the Russian population, elder generation, are just seeing this as some sort of vindictive West that's having a go at Russia.
There's something to be said about all of that. I mean, again, there's historical comparisons. He's doing stuff that he didn't used to do in the past. It was sort of like, you chuck your money in, we'll chuck our money in, and whoever wins, wins, and that's the end of it. And that was Vietnam, that was Korea, Afghanistan, and this just seems to be a new one. But I wonder if he's doing it because he's losing. And he's losing badly, and there's lots of stuff going on with that. But to go back with the other thing, and this is something I did want to talk about this week a bit more, was the hacking that's been taking place. You're absolutely right. The older generation seem to be attracted to the TV and follow state TV. That's been hacked recently, at least twice by the looks of it, with just the Ukrainian national anthem being played on multiple channels, which is quite a weird thing to explain away. But no news reporting's been put onto the channel, which is interesting, because be interested to see what they would do if news reports that were showing the opposite side were being broadcast, or if they really flipped it and made it look like it was a Russian TV program for half an hour and actually broadcast it as if it was a Russian program talking about what was really taking effect. I'd be curious to know even if the Russians knew about the nuclear power plant being attacked. Because I assume that would scare the living bejesus out of even the Russian populace if they thought that was going to happen. Are any of you aware of being aware of the hacking and what's been taking place with it?
I remember it at the very beginning, where I think it was Anonymous were hacking TV channels and broadcasting, the Ukrainian national anthem or Ukrainian music, but also imagery of Russian soldiers surrendering. So on the other side, I saw this week how the Russians, when they've taken over some of these towns in Ukraine, have organized pro-Russian protests or pro-Russian marches. So obviously they either frog march these people out it wasn't a protest, it was more just a pro-Russian march, welcoming the soldiers. So I think there's also going to be that angle as well. So this is going to be recorded and sent back to Moscow and to Russia to say, look, there are people there who want us there in Ukraine. Because, of course, the message has always been that we need to go there to protect pro-Russian people in Ukraine. Sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah, was that, sorry, just to clarify then, there were people who were in the Ukraine coming out in pro-Russia? Because I saw the stuff in Serbia, but I haven't seen anything in Ukraine at the moment. Has anyone else seen this on the TV? I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are.
I hadn't seen anything, no.
No, I saw it on Twitter. There was somebody had shared some video on Twitter. It was a town that was taken over by the Russians, and there was a pro-Russian march taking place, obviously straight after. It's interesting that these pro-Russian marches didn't take place before the war, but they're taking place after.
Actually,
But
I did see some...
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. No, I was going to say, I did see a film about this, and they'd bust people in. Did you see that? They bust them in to actually demonstrate. Yeah, they come from somewhere else.
Wow.
Which they can arrange that very easily anyway, can't they? They're going to do it. It's just part of the propaganda. It is just propaganda. I think
it's the same with the police forces as well. I mean, they even preempted the protests that were going to take place in Moscow and some of the key cities. I mean, they must be able to read what's going through people's mobile phones and so forth. To an extent, I would assume, even if you can encrypt.
But I think something with Putin is that it's not about providing misinformation. It's about creating confusion. So it's not about, okay, I have to counter an argument or counter a narrative. It's about injecting confusion. So if and we can see this when it comes to other issues like climate change. It's about it's about putting people on the other side who create doubt in people's mind. It's not, I'm providing an alternative. Look, climate change is not happening because of X. It's like, well, should we believe these scientists? Are these scientists telling the truth? It's about creating doubt in people's mind and seeding confusion. And I think that's how, and we can bring it back to Brexit as well. It was the Brexiteers were never actually presenting alternatives. Like, this is what's going to happen. Well, in some cases they did, but generally the idea, I think, about the goal of injecting all this money into the Brexit argument was to seed confusion. And people, of course, the majority of people voted not knowing what the EU was and what the outcome of Brexit would be for the UK. I think Rob wanted to come in with something. No,
sorry, Rob.
Oh, did I? No, I don't think so. I was just going to. An aside. Yeah, it's this phrase, isn't it? I'm just asking questions. And they sort of just put these points of view and said, "Oh, I haven't got an alternative, but I'm just asking questions." There's the sowing of confusion. I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's something I noticed now. What's happening is, if you look at Farage, for example, he's moved away from there yesterday or today, along with Richard Tice from the Reform Party. Now they're on the net zero. We need to stop net zero because it's damaging the economy, and it's these are the people who voted or campaigned for sanctions to be put on Britain to not to be able to export anymore, or not to be able to export as it was before, and they're complaining about how net zero will impoverish people.
Yeah,
he wants a referendum on it, doesn't he? Apparently, he wants a referendum on it. I think Farage spends his life thinking of ways that he can get in front of the cameras. Yeah. I think it's all about him promoting himself. He just wants to be on the telly, and I think it's just another daft ruse. But I mean, he's in effect saying, let's try and stop doing anything about global warming. Let's just all burn.
Yeah, I like how you said global warming. It's funny how climate change has become the word, and it used to be global warming, and it is global warming, and it's suddenly climate change. And you hear that, you're sort of thrown off with it, sort of going in the direction of like, oh, it could be a volcano or the sun heating up. It just makes it very ambiguous. And global warming just sounds more threatening. And I find it very funny that the terminology changed. I don't know when that took place or particularly why, and if there was a particular reason for it. But
although it may have been a narrative, it may have been a reaction to people who are saying, but it's snowing or it's cold. So it's like, yes, but okay, but obviously these people didn't understand the difference between weather and climate. Okay, so they were like, so if we talk about there's temperatures are rising, there is global warming, and the response, yeah, but it's snowing where I am. Okay.
I think Trump did that when they had the big freeze coming down from the Arctic, and it was -40. It was like, I bet you wish it was global warming right now. It's like, yeah, I think you missed the point. yeah, you're like, God, this is the president of the United States saying this. What on earth is going on?
He's not known for his wisdom.
What was that?
I say he's not renowned for his wisdom.
Yeah, it's what happens when you inject yourself with bleach. I think.
But he uses the best words. Okay, he went to the best university, so he learned the best words.
That's right.
But my problem is not so much him, but it's people who still think he's someone to follow.
Yeah.
But I think I dragged this a bit off topic there, but what do you guys see happening in Ukraine in the next number of weeks? Because I think what I've seen so far is, the Russians underestimated the response from the Ukrainians. I think the British government and the EU and the US have come out and said, look, we didn't expect the Ukrainians to hold on for so long. They fought much better than we believed they would have, and of course Russia, Putin in particular, believed he'd be in there and out in 72 hours, drop in his puppet, and that they would run the country. We've been seeing some massive resistance to the Russian army. We've seen Russian soldiers, and unfortunately, I don't know if this is part of the fog of war, but it's difficult to identify, is this something that's really happening? Is it isolated, where you see young conscripts from the Russian army just giving up? We see a lot of tanks, armored vehicles just being abandoned. Ukrainian farmers towing them back home. But what is going to happen over the next number of weeks? Are the Ukrainians going to be able to resist this? They're getting a lot of military support, equipment. I read this morning about how a number of countries are organizing, including the United States, are organizing a type of foreign legion to go to Ukraine. So that could be a way around involving NATO. What are your thoughts on that?
Shall I have a go?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think it's very, very difficult to know. It really is anyone's guess. We're all looking at the same images on the television and reading the same papers and so on. So we've only got so much information. No doubt it's very distorted. But it does seem to me you've got an almighty army which is utterly demoralized. And don't forget, these soldiers were stuck around for 2 months on the border in the freezing cold. They must be absolutely fed up to the teeth. And now they're having to kill people who they know are their own, they've probably got a lot of relatives. A lot of these Russian soldiers have got relatives in Ukraine and so on, so that their heart is not in it. On the other side, you've got a much smaller side who know the whole world is behind them and doing everything for them. And that must give them tremendous determination and what do you call it? Morale. Yeah, they must be really, really, really keen for it. And I don't think the Russians are ever going to beat them. They're going to be a nuisance forever. I mean, even if Russia does win, there's going to be an insurgency that'll just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very difficult to say when it'll end or how it'll end. And I think the other thing we've got to bear in mind is that the guy who's running the whole show, is responsible for everything, is a complete and utter madman. He's a loony.
Mm.
And very, very unpredictable. And he's cornered now, and the future doesn't look very good for him unless he gets a good result. And he isn't going to get a good result. So it's all very difficult, very difficult to predict, I think.
Michael, it's interesting you frame all that with it quite rightly as saying, we can only go on, we all read the same newspapers, we all read the same stuff online or whatever. I just wonder, Putin the madman, as it were, whether he is as fortunate as you and I and everybody here and everybody watching, is that I think his view of the Ukraine is probably more filtered than ours, because the people around him are so scared of him.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the recent press conferences that he's held. He talks to them like school kids. Everybody's afraid to tell him the truth. So I'm guessing that you and I and everybody watching is probably better informed than Vladimir Putin right at this moment, because he's being filtered.
Yeah.
I will mention, sorry, Max, you mentioned the clip of the farmer towing the tractor away, which is hilarious. Did anybody see the security camera footage of the Russian death squad that were going to the roof of a skyscraper for a surveillance mission, and the Ukrainians cut off the power and they're stuck in the lift? I mean, I'm taking nothing away from Ukrainians. The ferocity and the commitment they have, the courage is amazing. But on the other side, what seems to be the complete incompetence of the invading Russian forces, and that security camera footage in the lift just summed it up for me. Just
piece of advice, people. In an emergency, especially a war, don't use the lift.
Use the stairs.
Just before Alex, I just want to say thanks to Kate for sending a super chat. I forgot to mention at the beginning, the super chats, of course, will go to charity. We'll get some more information after the stream about that. Alex, so you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I'm looking at it in a military historian sort of context. He's obviously gone for a blitzkrieg sort of approach. Interestingly, did anyone see the Belarusian president put a map up detailing what the attack plan was?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, you're an idiot. But not only that, there's an arrow pointing into Moldova, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I think the Moldovans are going to be going for something. But if you look at the map, it's got a blitzkrieg element to it. And that type of tactic hasn't changed. There's another tactic called deep battle, which they did at the beginning, which was just hit all key installations, try and cut the communication off, try and stop any first response from airfields and everything else, which they did. But interestingly, I think if you look at the map, it's like 1, 2, 3. That third arrow is meant to be going down towards the south. And it looks like they've had to divert it to Kiev, which is a really interesting thing, because that's an encapsulation of blitzkrieg, which is encircle the enemy and don't hit the strong points and everything else. But it looks like just from that, you can see it's gone wrong. And, it happens in war and you've got to divert it and move. But if you then start to look at all the other things that people have been commenting on, you've got the aircraft that don't seem to be there at the moment. And you go, right, so that's logistics. That means you're not repairing anything, or you're not able to repair, or you don't have the equipment to repair anything. You've got the trucks that are stationary. I read an amazing report on, admittedly it was a Twitter feed, but it made a lot of sense, saying that the trucks, their tires only last about a month, was what the analyst was saying. And that's why they're all parked up against each other, because if they got direct sun, the sun actually rips the tires apart after about a month of exposure, which is why they're all parked together to shade them all from the sun. You've also got the fact that the ground is completely useless. They didn't listen to Hitler, they didn't learn from Napoleon. You never attack in the winter. They've gone in after the Olympics, coincidence, I think not, and all the ground started to turn into mud, which means you're seeing those tanks churn up in the mud and can't go anywhere, which is a beautiful thing for all the farmers. They don't need to grow crops. They've got tanks growing up the ground. But I'm looking at a logistical point of view. I think he's knackered it. He's gone at the wrong time of the year when they should have gone in the winter. He was too nice to listen to China. He doesn't have the materials. The sanctions are going to strip back those materials even more. So I'm looking at this and going, it starts to explain everything. It also explains why he's like, sanctions of war. And it's like, I don't remember any other Russian president saying that during the Cold War. It was sort of like, we're going to fight over it, we'll pump money in, and whoever wins, wins, and then we move on to the next territory to turn either communist or capitalist. So that would be my interpretation. I think logistically he's knackered and he's probably doesn't have the resources to continue this war long term. The question I'd like to ask everyone is, how can he leave and save face? Because that's what he has to do. If he wants to stay in power, he's got to somehow show he's had a victory and leave. And if that could be done, he'll probably pull out and be like, I've done my best for the Ukraine and everything else. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think it's very difficult to see any way that he can leave without losing face. I mean, what can he do? Unless we give him something, we can hardly reward him for what he's done. So what possibility is there? I just don't see it.
No, I don't see it either. Sorry, Rob, do you want to jump in?
No. It's just, I think he's gone in too far now. I can't see any way back for him. And just going back to something you were saying, Alex, you have to worry about Moldova. I think I'm not sure he's going to stop with Ukraine. I also I'm a bit more pessimistic. I mean, again, going back to Michael's point, we all read the same news, that we hear the same information over here. But I just can't see there's any possibility that he won't achieve his primary objective, which is to install a puppet government in Kiev. I just, it's just a matter of time. I thought, this Aleppo type strategy where he's just leveling the landscape. He's got no morals. He's committing war crimes. I can't see what can stop him. Just in terms of numbers, he will achieve his objective, install the puppet government, which is, I think, the plan, and then perhaps at that point we'll see a partial withdrawal, but only once he's achieved his goals. And I think we're back to the days of the Iron Curtain. I really do. I think that, and whether that Iron Curtain encircles Ukraine and putting that to the east, or whether it comes as far as Moldova, I don't know. I'm not at all optimistic.
I'm not so sure, Rob. I mean, I agree he could well succeed in taking over the country, but I think he's going to have a huge insurgency, fully supported by the West. And also, going back to the point I made earlier, I think Russians are going to get cross that they can't buy an iPhone, they can't buy a Toyota, they can't go shopping to the mall and see all the Western brands and so on. And the fact they haven't got the F1 and they can't take part in footballs and all the rest of it, I think people are going to get very, very angry about it. And he's going to be the focus of the blame. I mean, there's nobody else to blame.
Well, I hope you're right. I do hope you're right, of course. Yeah.
So does that mean, Rob, that you think that this will just continue until he wins, and he'll just keep streaming in troops until he's got a victory, and that's it? Like, is that your opinion?
I mean, we're all just guessing, but I would have thought he's not going to pull out now, so he's just going to go on, and he'll flatten anything he needs to flatten, and he has the power to do that. But that's not going to get rid of the resistance. The resistance is going to be there and fighting really strong. It's going to be an impossible country to run, to manage. And it's just going to be a huge, huge headache. It's going to be,
I just worry,
all over again.
Yeah, this asymmetrical warfare. I mean, I'm talking from ignorance, to be honest, but I would just be concerned that, like thinking back to Cold War's days, maybe the resistance fighters within the country. But I mean, the Russians are very good. The Russian state are very good at the secret police type thing, and I'm not sure how effective a long-term asymmetrical warfare would be with the sort of apparatus of the Russian state there, sort of weeding out the saboteurs. I don't know. Again, maybe I'm just being glass half empty kind of guy.
But also, sorry, go on, Alex.
So Afghanistan and Vietnam, part of the reasons for their victory is one, that Vietnam had huge underground tunnel systems plus jungle foliage, which just couldn't be cleared. There's a few other things as well. And then Afghanistan was the mountain ranges. It's difficult to access them, and there's loads of historical accounts of why Russia wasn't able to do that. And why I think only one group of people has ever conquered Afghanistan, believe it or not, and that was the Mongolians. No one else has succeeded, which is a fascinating stat, considering you've got thousands of years of history. But Ukraine doesn't have that. I mean, I had a good old look around. The only mountain or hill ranges are in the east. Next to Europe. There's nothing. It's just flat land and forests. And I don't know if that's good enough an area to be able to stage a full guerrilla warfare strategy. So I'd agree with Rob on that. I don't know how they're gonna stage that.
I think they all go home, and every now and then there's a bomb goes off and a bridge is blown up, or some, like the IRA, you just pop up and let off a few bombs, and this is difficult to cope with. The country is so big; it's a huge country, as we all know, the size of France or whatever. 44 million people. Well, they're not going to settle for Russians, especially knowing that the whole of the West is supporting them and wants them to win.
Yeah.
Wants them to.
I think that's a big difference between, for example, Syria and Afghanistan and also Syria and Afghanistan, and unfortunately it's also the mentality. It's far away. Well, this is right on our doorstep, and there is a feeling that, at least when it came to Syria and Afghanistan, it wasn't expected to expand beyond that. So, there is a real fear that, okay, even if Putin puts someone in charge in Ukraine, his goal is not to stop there. So I think, as we've seen with Moldova, maybe Moldova's next, or other Eastern European countries. So how he gets away from this, I can only see him doing something like changing his plan. But I don't think he has the mentality to do that, because I think he's insane. But the only solution is to change because I think his original plan was, okay, get into Ukraine, drop in a puppet, and then move on to the next country. But now he's realized that can't work, so he has to shift to plan B, which is just destroy the country. But then what do you do? Like, okay, you put in a puppet regime, but that's not going to last, and you need to reinforce that with soldiers, with equipment. And now, with the Russian economy on its knees, if it hasn't already collapsed, you can't maintain that. So everything that he has planned has completely collapsed, I think, and he's not in a position to move on to the next country.
Do you know how many? I had this claim come out yesterday, but it's interesting because you mentioned the Russian economy, and I was talking about logistics earlier. Do you know how many motorways there are in Russia?
No idea.
What?
Really?
St. Petersburg to Moscow. So I'm looking at this and going, I reckon he's pumped the money into the military and the secret services and the mafia. He's used them to control the population. And then no one's invested back into the country. And this is why all the money's been laundered out. What you would expect, like BP's an example of this. There's an argument which I don't necessarily agree with it. The UK government is saying, we're not going to tax the petroleum companies in the UK because we want them to go back out and start looking for more oil. And they'll do that because they know there's more money. I've got a sneaking suspicion this is the crux of the problem. The oligarchs have just taken all the money offshore instead of reinvesting it back into Russia. And if there's only one, bear in mind, this is two United States and there's one motorway, and he's trying to invade Ukraine. I mean, even Hitler went off and built motorways across the whole of Germany, and this guy's been in, 30, 40 years?
Yeah, but it's a big country, Alex. It's a big place to build motorways all over, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they've got railways, but it's a really, really big and expensive place to cover in smart new roads.
Can I just?
I mean, the whole country has been run for the benefit of, number one, Putin, and then the oligarchs. The oligarchs who prop him up, and they've just stolen everything.
Can I just jump in with it? So we have a lot of super chats. I'd like to read out some of those. The first one is from Eloza. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Do you think this invasion by an authoritarian dictator will affect Brexiteers' views, the people, not the politicians, of the EU? So do you think this invasion is going to? Well, I don't know, but does anyone have a take on that? That maybe Brexiteers looking at this would be like, maybe it wasn't a good idea to support people like Farage because Farage has some dodgy contacts, or just this idea that we have this dictator who's invading a country. What do you think about that? Is it going to change Brexiteers' views? Not the politicians, but the people.
I don't think so-called Brexiteers are clever enough to make that connection, or any connection, frankly. I think they're just carry on thinking Brexit was a wonderful idea, and Ukraine's a completely different matter.
I think generally you're right, Michael. But I think this is another one that you and I have spoken in the past about this. I don't think there's ever going to be one event that suddenly makes Brexiteers go, "Oh, I'm wrong." But I do think it might be just another, drip, drip, drip.
Yeah.
I'm as you know, I'm living here in the heart of Brexit land down in the southwest. But the Brexity people around here are almost sort of apologetic about. They do, well, partly because they talk to me, but they are aware of a Russian connection. I think you're right, Michael. Most of them are not. But it's just another just tap tap tap, drip drip drip. I think we're getting that, but only small, Michael. I agree, even it's not. impact, but it helps. Yeah.
Alex, what do you think?
It's quite incredible what's happening with Carol Cadwallader and the Aaron Banks thing going through the courts and things. I mean, maybe we're maybe coming more into the public consciousness. The photos that are emerging of Lyubov Chanukin with Liz Truss and Andrea Loathsome and all the rest of them. It's the public consciousness, I think. Sorry, I can't help it. I just love.
No, we love them. Don't stop.
Yeah, don't.
You've got to ridicule these people. I mean, Andrea Loathsome, doesn't that sort of sum it up? And I love Michael's. I've stolen it from you, Michael. Dim Lizzie Truss.
Oh, right.
Lizzie fans about that actually. So, yes. But
that's good. I've not heard that one. I think you gave me a new one just before we came on air as well, which was Jacob Rees-Smug.
Yeah, Jacob.
Wow, it's so good. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say I've got some good news on all this. If you want some really good news about, apparently, according to the Daily Mail, which is a highly reliable and excellent publication that I recommend, according to them, Boris Johnson is going to assume leadership of global efforts to end the war.
Yeah,
so that's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, here's a 6-point plan, isn't it?
That's correct. Yes, I'm not sure if he's told the EU or if he's told Biden or if he's told Xi Jinping yet, but I'm sure they'll all be delighted.
Yeah.
And how can they print this stuff?
I'm just waiting for the Express's headline. Boris mission accomplished.
Yes.
Boris declares victory.
God, could you imagine that happening? I mean, wow. And it probably will. They'll probably try and claim it. Like, yep. They'll be like, yeah, we did it all. It was all down to us. Oh, and I've noticed they're saying Europe, not the European Union, which is like, you hear that term "sneaky Russians" that keeps coming up, but like, these are sneaky conservatives. Like, they'll just do anything to get some credit. I'm pretty sure they sell out their own mother for a bag of money and some Brexit love. Like
any success,
they mud wrestle their own mother for some Brexit love and votes. And
Rob, you wanted to say something?
Success they claim could not have been achieved if we were within the EU. Just get that clear, all right? Any success is only possible because we're not in the EU.
There you go.
Sorry, go on.
No, I just want to say,
super chats coming.
Yeah, there's a lot of them in. So, Kate, thanks so much for that super chat, £5. We have KCH Muller, who says the recent comment of the gentleman in the bottom gives men downfall vibes, and this scares me right front and center because Putin has a certain suitcase which Adolf Hitler, Adolf the Private, had not. So yes, while it's a very valid point how there is a risk that Putin will be painted himself into a corner, and while Hitler had his own way out, Putin may have a different way out, and it might involve opening a suitcase and pressing a button or turning a key, whatever it is. Before I get to that, get your response from that. Vlado, thanks so much for that super chat, and Chris Murphy, thank you so much for that super chat as well. What do you just quickly on that? Does anyone have any comments about maybe Putin's way out?
I'm not sure that this. Again, I'm not a defence expert, but I'm not sure this sort of red button really exists. To be honest, I think it's a combination of factors. From what I've read about the Russian nuclear defence system, is that there would have to be a number of people that are sort of together, combined to release or launch any nuclear weapons. Who knows? I can't believe that the Russian generals would be so stupid as to go along with the plans of a madman, as they must know he is by now. But I don't know. I'm not a Russian.
And each of them would know that if they do go ahead, that's the end of the world and the end of everything. So you're right, Rob. I mean, anyone who's not insane is going to say this is not the thing to do.
What he could do is do it in slices and just go, because there's a report or claim in the news this morning that he's saying that the Ukrainians are building a dirt bomb. And you're going, right, is that him putting in the foundations to give the excuse to go, oh, we've got to nuke them before they nuke us? And if that happens, I mean, I'm hoping it's going to be what I hope is inner circle's just going to bash his head in, basically, and shoot him in the back of the head and have done with him, because it's the simplest solution. I mean, in many ways, that saves Russia more than anything else. Putting a bullet in the back of his head and he's dead. You can then go and save face. You can go, right, it was him. He's a madman. Russia loves everyone. We're going to calm all this tension down. It's all being created by him. We're going to pull the troops out. And that is a simple way of saving face, but it involves getting rid of Putin. But that's easier said than done. I mean, he's obviously got a security guard attachment to him that is probably brainwashed to loyalty to the nth degree. Do any of you notice how he walks? This is an interesting little fact.
Yes.
Do you know he doesn't move his right arm? He moves his left only. If you watch him in the way he walks.
Why is that?
Sorry.
Why is that?
Supposedly that's a KGB bit of training, so you can draw a gun quickly.
Really?
You don't move it. That's the rumor. I don't know how much that's true, but it's just interesting he never moves it, and it does make a lot of sense if you want to be quick on the draw. So again, getting close to him and getting rid of him like that isn't going to be a necessarily easy task.
I'm sure it'll be impossible. He's absolutely neurotic, isn't he? He's terrified. He's hiding away. Those guys are going to kill him. By the time they get to the table, they'll be exhausted.
I don't know even if I don't know if a pistol would have that type of range either. We have the Ministerian has a super chat. Thanks so much for that. At least Farage's paymasters might have gifted us the EU army. Makes you think. Yes. And then he's written something in Russian or Ukrainian. I'm not sure. I presume Ukrainian. What do you think about? So there was this, Project Fear, the EU army. What are your opinions on a potential EU army? Do you think that would be a good idea? We're deeply dependent on NATO. Do you see an EU army forming?
I don't see any problem with it. I don't know whether it will or not. I don't see any problem with it. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go and put my battery in, if you excuse me.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
I see it happening. It makes sense. It's just easier to coordinate. If it's every single nation independently running and then having to coordinate, it's a nightmare. Or it's not a nightmare. It's just that much harder and doesn't seem to be necessary. And it's the same with, similar sort of principle to why we have NATO. It's just easier to coordinate everything together. So it's a simple command structure. It's all about efficiency in warfare. So I don't see it being a problem or anything. In fact, knowing the way all this is going with Brexit, we'll probably be like putting our detachments with them anyway to go on fields and practice organising together with the EU army. I mean, what about yourself, Rob? What do you think?
Well, if you'd have asked me a week ago, I'd have said, that's never going to happen. But, I mean, so much has happened this week, hasn't it? I mean, the German policy on arming Ukrainians, it's unbelievable how much has shifted in the last week. So I'm sort of feeling, again, that I'm not an expert here, because I would never have predicted the EU army. But I now agree with you, Alex. I think it's looking likely, the direction of travel.
Yeah, and just on a side note to that, there's growing support in Ireland, for example, in respect to joining NATO, which is something that has never been on the table before and never had any sort of support. It was a pipe dream for a lot of people, but there is growing. So I don't know whether if it would win in a referendum, but there's growing support for that. Maybe there would be more support for joining an EU army. But I think, and I mentioned this maybe at the last chat, was how we look at the last U.S. president, and the Democrats are probably going to be out at the next election. Hopefully not, but there's Trump could be back in again, somebody worse than Trump. And I always say this, we look at the US president, we think it can't get any worse than that.
Oh.
We said that about George W. Bush, and look at what came along after him on the Republican side. So yeah, there's somebody potentially worse than Trump, waiting in the shadows, or whatever the term is. But it's and this would be obviously somebody who would say, look, we want to reduce our commitment to NATO, and we need to have a backup. We need to, and I think this war that's taking place at the moment reinforces that. I just want to move on to the next super chat. It's from ST White. As long as he holds NATO countries, avoids NATO countries, he creates a lot of pain. He's had years to do work about. He's had years to do work about the money markets. China is staying out of this because now it benefits them. This thing about, so there was this idea that China would come to Russia's aid, but that doesn't seem to be happening. Does anyone have any comments on that?
I got the impression that some banks had started putting sanctions on Putin, but I didn't read. I only saw the headline. I didn't read the details, so I can't comment more than that. But if he starts threatening nuclear weapons, I could see the Chinese going in, and they've got that. I think it is the Chinese that have the expression, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." And I'm sort of mixed as to whether or not they're enjoying this, because I know the top lot love money and love spending money in Europe. So do they want that gone? Do they want a war, and then, it'll devastate the Chinese economy because, they're selling to Europe, they're selling to Russia. And if that can't happen and they can't sell those types of goods, that could be an issue.
I think the Chinese will calculate purely on commerce. It's a question of what's going to do it for them financially. I'm pretty sure they'll realize that Putin's a nutcase, and they obviously don't want there to be a democracy in Ukraine if possible. But then they're not going to support him doing what he's doing now. I think they're keeping quite quiet. They abstained, didn't they, from the vote the other day in the United Nations. And I think they'll simply see what's in it for them. They want the oil and the gas from Russia, and they want the market for their goods. But other than that, I think they'll keep out of it.
Yeah,
I think from a Chinese perspective as well, you can't help but see from a Chinese sort of viewpoint, Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan.
Mm.
And I think, China would love to do a Russia, but more successfully with Taiwan, given the chance. Yes. So I wonder how much they're just standing by and looking at how this is panning out.
Yeah. I think it'll definitely give them pause for thought, won't it?
Yes, I think so, Michael. I would have thought that was a reason for fulsome Chinese support for Russia in the beginning, and it never happened. I'm heartened by the fact, as you say, Michael, they seem to be standing there abstaining and being much less than fulsome in their support of Russia.
Yeah.
It's got to be one of the positives, I think.
I've got a further question to that, which I'm curious about to everyone. What do you all think about the involvement of? I'm going to try and make sure I phrase this correctly because I don't want it getting misinterpreted. But a number of commentators have said the expansion of NATO is a cause for this tension. What does everyone else think about that in regards to the expansion of NATO? Do you think that has been a factor in this, or was it always something that was going to happen?
It's definitely a factor. I mean, that's what Putin has said all along, hasn't he? That he didn't want NATO forces on his doorstep, and there was a talk of the possibility of the Ukraine joining NATO, and that was what it was all about from him. So yes, it's a really big factor, and of course the opposite is going to happen because Finland and Sweden are now looking at applying to join NATO, and we don't know what will happen with Ukraine, but and we're all beefing up our forces all along the along the border with Russia, particularly in the Baltic states. So it's been a very bad result from Putin's point of view with regard to NATO.
Mm. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I totally agree with Michael. I think Putin's completely shot himself in the foot, and the objectives that he set out with completely reversed on him. I mean, going back to Brexit again, as though we're obsessed or whatever, but I'm sure Brexit really encouraged Putin to take this step. You know, it's mainly about NATO. I agree with Michael, but surely Brexit would have been the fact that he managed to split Europe. And let's not forget, we talk about a European army. There's only two big military forces in Europe, which is France and the UK, and Putin has managed to just basically draw a wedge down the two of them. So that would have encouraged him, but. I totally agree with what Michael said. It's proved wrong. It's actually strengthened NATO. I don't think NATO. I can't remember NATO being this unified since George W. Bush's day. Really. I mean,
Well, the whole world is united, aren't they? I mean, we're all united against, with the exception of Eritrea. I think they voted in favour or something. But I mean, we're all the whole world's against him.
No, I just want to say something. Yeah, about the idea that it's not. I understand. It's we have to be careful how we say this, because this is what Putin wants people to believe, that it's NATO's fault that this has taken place, and I think we have to remember the idea that they're sovereign countries and they should have permission to join NATO if they want. I think. It's a reaction to Russia. It's not that these countries have joined NATO and then Russia says, well, we need to do something about it. It's the other way around. The fact that countries like Finland want to join NATO is a reaction to Russia. So if this war had not taken place, if Russia did not build up forces on its border, then there wouldn't be a request to join NATO. So, and if you look at there aren't requests to join NATO on the other side of the world, on other Russian borders. So, or maybe that's a stupid point I'm trying to make here. But where there is a perceived threat that those countries are going to join NATO, like the idea that even Ireland would be considering joining NATO, that's not about NATO expansion. That's about a reaction to Russian aggression. I just want to read out some more super chats. JD, thanks so much for that. Is it business as usual with the authoritarian, with the biggest stick ruling the roost, or we stand up to Putin and let the chips lay where they fall? Do we stand up to Putin, or just let him work?
I think our big mistake is not having stood up to him before. He's become overconfident. It was Georgia, and then it was Syria, and each time we backed down and didn't do anything, and he's got overconfident. But I think to stand up to him now, well, we are standing up to him now, but there's only so much we can do because he's got the nuclear option, which we're all terrified of.
Yeah, there's so many parallels with previous history, because this is what we did with Hitler. We went, oh, he just wants to join up with Austria. Oh, he just wants to put troops in the Rhineland. Oh, he just wants to connect up, German-speaking peoples back to his country. It's total appeasement. And generally, the interesting thing I always bring up is the one time, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, the one time I've seen in the build-up to World War II where he backed down was when he said, oh, right, we're going to do Anschluss with Austria. And Mussolini went, no, you're not. Stuck a load of troops on the border of Austria. And Hitler backed down, and it was almost like another level of communication where it's like, I'm only going to be able to communicate with you that this isn't acceptable by showing some sort of level of force, even if it does mean going to war. Now, I'm not suggesting we should do that, but what I am suggesting is maybe we should have gone in a bit harder with some of the stuff that we have done to really send a message to him, to make him go, wait a minute, this isn't always like the best option. Maybe it's actually better to do diplomacy. But when you're dealing with someone who is clearly some form of narcissist and sociopath, psychopath, it's pretty hard to do this level of communication. And I'd probably even go to say that he probably suffered some PTSD with the collapse of the Soviet Union and just couldn't handle it. And again, there's a parallel with Hitler, because Hitler couldn't cope with Germany losing World War One. That's why he went into politics. I think Putin did the same. He couldn't cope with the Soviet Union collapsing, so he went into politics to correct it. And I think there's some irony there as well. Like, if he just built up his economy, maybe other countries would have come and joined Russia and become part of the Russia trading bloc. But because he's a greedy little so-and-so, and all the Russian oligarchs are greedy little so-and-sos and didn't reinvest in the country, this has come back to bite them in the ass, because this long term, it's just absolutely stupid.
Yeah, I just want to jump in for a second. It was like I'm looking at pictures online of military hardware abandoned. Some of these tanks are pretty new, and some of these tanks cost tens of millions of pounds of dollars. Like, imagine if he had invested that money in infrastructure, invested that money in leveling up, to quote a British politician. If that money had been spent on the people, I don't know, things could have been much different.
But Alex, he doesn't care about the people. He's not really interested.
Yeah.
He's interested in becoming very rich and being powerful. He doesn't care if the whole of Russia are serfs. It doesn't matter to him. So he has the opportunity and the ability to steal all this money and to use the oligarchs to steal all this money and secure his future and live extremely luxuriously. It's like, in North Korea, Kim Jong-un. I mean, he lives very, very luxuriously, and the whole population are absolutely destitute. This is different from a democracy where the welfare of the people is what the various parties are fighting to try and project.
Rob, you wanted to say something?
It's like North Korea, Michael. Can I give you another comparison? The United Kingdom, £35 billion going on test, track and trace that ended up it's a Tory owners. We're throwing all this mud at Putin, and I'm the last person to apologise for Putin, but there are echoes of what's going on in the UK. The population being robbed, public money, billions going in the pockets of Tory donors. It's a disgrace. And before we, it takes away. It's like this thing about Boris Johnson accusing Putin of breaking international law. In a limited and specific way? Pot and kettle in some of it. Now, I'm not suggesting we're anywhere near as bad, but God, we need to get our own house in order.
Although, just as you say that, it just reminds me of something I read. Is about how if you're on universal credit, you'll be sanctioned quicker than if you're a Russian billionaire.
With a higher tax rate than the richest person in the UK. 55% of every pound that you earn is deducted from your universal credit. They don't even do that to the rich, but they're doing that to people on universal credit. That's a tax, which isn't said or talked about in the media. So if you earn on universal credit, they then take 55p out of every pound, just to clarify that, which is a tax. So they're taxing people who are on the lowest amount of money in the UK more than the rich. Plus, if you go over 12k or you're employed by a company, you're then taxed on top of that income tax. Which is
one of the most depressing things I heard today or yesterday, I think maybe it was a video from yesterday, but I saw it this morning, was how there are people, fans of Chelsea Football Club, defending Abramovich.
Yeah.
Look at what he's done for the team. And these are people, obviously, who are not multimillionaires. These are ordinary working class people, probably, who are like... I would love to speak to them and say, if some of you are probably on universal credit, you would suffer more if you didn't turn up for a bloody job interview than he's suffering. And I think, personally, I think Chelsea Football Club should be taken from him and sold, and the money collected should be, I don't know, donated to the Ukrainians, but or to charities or whatever. But it's absurd in the mentality of people where you have people who are working class people, because it's their football club. That it's my pride and joy that he has built up. Obviously, he's done it not because he cares about football or because he cares about Chelsea Football Club. It's a way of hiding money. It's a way of laundering that cash.
Yeah.
Can I just say something on Abramovich? He's supposed to be quite close to Putin. And he has said that he's going to give the proceeds of the sale of Chelsea to Ukraine. Yeah. And that is directly in opposition to Putin. And I'm wondering how that's going, whether the other oligarchs are going to also turn against Putin, because he does rather need them.
Yeah, I didn't know he was going to do that. Sorry, apologies for that. I didn't know that he was going to give the proceeds. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Which is a complete break with Putin, and I don't know what he's thinking or how it's going to pan out, or is he breaking with Putin? But I think for him, Chelsea was just a plaything. I think it was just rather than a way of laundering money. I think it was just a plaything. He's got all this money, he can buy it and have it. As other very rich people who buy football clubs, it's just really just because they can and it's fun.
So, unless Rob, do you want to jump in before I jump in?
Carry on, Alex.
I worked in football. I worked in football for about 10 years, and I worked from grassroots all the way to quite high up. And I actually had a job interview at Chelsea Football Club. And I've got to say, facilities are great. The way people were talking about how the club was run, nothing was a problem if they needed it. And I'll also say, I'll bet a bottom dollar he's done a lot of community work, and it's part of the remit if you run a club at that level. Probably more than is realised, and he's probably helped out quite a lot of local kids, food projects, free football training, and everything else. I hear a lot of good things from the club. I have heard a lot of good things from the club, and I know that it's also part of the remit if you are a Premier League club that you've got to go in and help out with the local community. They've sort of stipulated that it can't just because a football club is more than just a commercial property. It is a community asset, and all of them should be community assets. And interestingly, my football club Oxford is now a community asset because it's not quite a business. You can't shut it down because it's the local community that built it. So how do you work that? And that's not to defend him, because let's face it. If you read into it, there's another interesting thing. Apparently, his parents are Ukrainian. Did anyone know that? Abramovich's parents are Ukrainian, apparently, or grandparents. I'm not sure which. But that's a rumor that I'd be curious to find out more about. Which then adds in another level of complexity here. But of course, where did he get all his money from? Well, buying stocks and shares. And let's face it, if he's become one of the richest guys in Russia, he's not done it on the nicety of kindness and Charles Dickens, has he?
No, it seems that what happened. Yeah, it seems what happened in the 90s that Boris Yeltsin, when he became president, he basically handed over the running of the country to these individuals, and they were able to sell off state assets, or they were given the job. Okay, you sell off these state assets to private companies, and they made an enormous amount of money. But when the government started to function again, they had to hide this money. They had to put it somewhere. So they put it into property in London, or they put it into yachts and things like this. I just the idea that we have ordinary people, working class people, coming to jumping on board on the side of maybe not Abramovich but other individuals who where did they get this money from? Obviously, these people are connected to Putin. And I just read something this morning how the I think it's the former Russian or current Russian foreign minister has been sanctioned by the European Union and the US, but he hasn't been sanctioned. He was sanctioned 11 days ago by both the US and the EU, but in the UK he hasn't been sanctioned. And Dominic Raab was saying, well, we don't have enough evidence or something like that this morning. So guys, we're just a little bit over the time, so I think we'll have to cut it off here. But I just want to thank everyone who sent in a super chat. Unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to read them all out because we'd be here for a few hours. I just want to say thanks to let me just see, the last one was the Freckle Penny. Thanks so much for that. SD White once again. Alexis, thanks so much for that. Freddie, thank you so much. Wally, thank you. Andrew, Urus, thanks so much. Jerry Watson, thank you so much. George, Evelyn, wow, and Ray. So many super chats. Thank you so much, guys. What we're going to do is when we have all the money collected, we're going to donate this to charity, and we'll post. I haven't posted it from last week, but we're trying to organize a good charity to send to. It's important we send it to the right one and not the wrong one. So I want to say a huge thank you to Michael and Rob, and of course Alex from Political X for coming on today. There were so many things to get through. Unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to get through. We wanted to talk about Trump, and we wanted to talk a bit more about Brexit as well, but unfortunately, time is the enemy. So I want to say thank you to guys. If there's anything you'd like to say as well before we finish.
Thank you to everyone, and thank you for all the donations.
Yes, indeed. Same again. Thank you to everyone who's donated, and thank you for inviting me to this chat, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Thanks very much, everybody that's watching, and thank you to you, Max, as well. Fantastic.
Thanks a lot. So I see everyone next week at our next brunch, same time, same channel. Have a great